let's start in the past,
Right.
because I don't think a lot of people are here from last year. Cherish Health, explain the devices that you've been creating, what's already on the market before we move on to what's new.
Sure. Um, so we started Cherish in January of 2000, which was just a few months before the world shut down. And at that point, we had never intended to bring something that we had as part of our IP to market, which was a wearable patch that picked up heart rate, respiration, temperature, SpO2 on a wearable device. All of a sudden, that thing, which was really IP we had inherited from some of the assets we had brought in, became quite relevant to help people stay at home and not fill up emergency rooms and be monitored, and then get help either at home or sent an ambulance to bring them in if their condition worsened. Right? So we very quickly brought that to market, started serving especially folks with access issues, people in veterans homes and homeless shelters and so on, so that they would wind up with at least some way to know whether they'd contracted the disease. That was how we contributed in the early days of COVID and through most of COVID. But really, that was the sideshow. And while all of that was happening, we were working on what we talked briefly about last year, and what is now real and was actually introduced to a very large audience to start bringing to market last Thursday.
So this is great, and totally aligns with our themes of diagnostics in the home. But why don't you, you've got the device, why don't you show it off and explain what it does?
Sure, great. So what we started off with was a thesis that this is my fifth company. Prior companies, we've done lots and lots of work in healthcare, digital health. We built many gadgets that back then would fit into provider-driven healthcare, where a hospital or provider organization would help manage some kind of care in their hospital setting, in their doctor's office, and over time in the home setting. We did a whole bunch of stuff with remote patient monitoring. We learned a lot of lessons about why remote patient monitoring is just a bad business. And so many companies have come and gone where they've never achieved scale. We've understood that there's really a discontinuity in incentives. If you keep people out of hospital beds, the folks who are actually paying for this stuff to be in your home, to keep you away from their hospital, make their money only by having you show up at the hospital, right? So there's this massive discontinuity, and that creates all sorts of problems. And then everyone else who's been in that space, by and large, and this really is pretty much universal, they've designed technology to work the way hospitals work, the way provider organizations work, which is, huge amounts of command control, where these devices go through a whole lot of validation. They go through professional setup. Someone has to show up and set them up. Someone has to monitor them, that they're working every day. Someone then comes and collects them when you're done. And that's just not scalable. And all of these things just add new cost rather than introduce new ways of taking out cost and new ways of creating efficiency, right? So that's the set of challenges that we saw. And we also saw that healthcare began to come home, at pace during COVID. We all saw teleconsultations happening, but then all the other stuff that could have moved to the home didn't. And it didn't ultimately, again, because of incentives. So we said, well, how do we create an alternative path where consumers come in and can actually get the help they need from within their own families, within their own care circles, take care of themselves, especially people who are elderly, frail, especially around things like falling, where if they could get help without being handed a device that required lots of care and feeding, where there was a doctor at the other end and they couldn't get the device unless they qualified, what if they could get a device in their homes that just worked all the time, that didn't have the kinds of problems that I described, that didn't have the kinds of problems that even consumer devices like beautiful magical watches and Fitbits also suffer, which is you have to remember to wear them, you have to remember to charge them, you have to want to wear them. Even pendants, I don't know a single person who likes wearing one of those. And very, very frequently, we've heard stories about people who've fallen, who've been 4 feet away from the pendant that's sitting on their bedside table, and they've broken a hip, and they're on the ground, for days sometimes with bad things happening. Right? So all that stuff, we said, how do we solve that with a whole different mindset, not a medical device mindset, but a consumer gadget mindset? And that's what this is. So we started this really with a failure. The failure was I'd taken my sabbatical between companies 4 and 5. Sabbatical was I was the global head for digital health at Accenture, and we ran a whole bunch of experiments. We brought in really cool technology from Intel, infrared cameras. We brought in AI from MIT. We fused the two, built this lovely lab across the street from Comcast Tower, literally recreated a living room. We built a story about a family, this painter who lived in Oregon who said, I'm going to leave your feet first, right? That was the story we built, and we started showing that story to people who cared, like the CEO of Comcast or the folks at Amazon, folks at Walmart and Best Buy and so on. And everyone really fell in love with what we'd achieved, which was this ambient device that sat on a coffee table, that looked at what was going on all the time, that used this pretty magical AI that was clinically validated, that could pick up your body motion, could pick up whether you're sitting, standing, walking, lying down, and could very precisely pick up whether you'd fallen and raise an alarm, get you help. That was awesome. A whole bunch of these companies said, let's go make a business of it. And we ran 2 surveys with AARP, 1,000 people each time, and we ran some focus groups as well. And people loved the concept. There was no more stuff to wear, nothing to turn on, nothing to download an app and manage, nothing to engage with, right? Because I personally don't believe that patient engagement is something to focus on as a better outcome. The less we engage, the more benefit we can get without engagement, the more likely it is that we'll derive that benefit. Engagement tapers out over time. That's the problem. People fatigue of these gadgets and stuff. And so people love the concept that this ambient. It's like home security. I don't think about this, right? Once it's installed, it works. I get help when I need it. Except this thing had a lens. And fewer than 40% of the folks we surveyed were willing to accept something that had a lens sitting on their dresser in their bedroom. Well, duh, right?
Because it was an image-based system.
Yes.
And you had a camera in people's houses.
Infrared. And it didn't matter how much we
I
explained
think that
it
means
was infrared.
it can
right?
see through your clothes.
Well, there you go.
That's not better.
That's not better, right? Yeah, exactly.
So the idea of the camera was the deal breaker.
Yes.
And people have mixed feelings about Alexa, but a camera is definitely something
It's
they
a
didn't
bridge
want,
too far, right?
especially for this population.
Any population. Like I can't imagine, almost anybody saying, "Hey, Lens watching me is okay," all the time, right?
You haven't been on TikTok lately.
All right, I get it. Yes, I have 2 teenagers, so yes.
So you tried to launch the product. You got basically everyone passed.
Actually, no. Comcast asked me to come build a business around it, and the folks at Amazon asked me to join them in the Haven project, that the joint venture with JP Morgan as their chief product officer. After all was said and done, I had to go back to all these folks and say, hey guys, we have a problem. This is not an integration moment. This is not the technology exists. We have to put it together with the right product market fit and launch. This is really an invention moment. And so that's what we set out to do in January of 2020. And when we set that out to do that, we had no idea where we were going to solve this problem. Where in the spectrum we were going to find a technology that wasn't creepy and that gave us the fidelity that we needed. And at that point, there were 5 or so companies trying to do this with radar. Almost all of them were piggybacking off the fact that automotive radar had become a thing for autonomous driving. Cheap chips from Texas Instruments in particular, $20, you can see far distances with lots of fidelity. And there were people who were also still trying to do this with cameras. Well, the camera guys, fast forward to today, have all they've given up on the home market. Even the home security folks, one of my partners even, bought a company that had a camera device for inside the home security. And they've moved away from that, right? That doesn't work. The camera guys who tried to do this with health monitoring, safety monitoring, they've all essentially become in-hospital solutions. The theory being, you give up most of your privacy when you're admitted to a hospital. What's a camera on a wall staring at you, right? That's not necessarily a bridge too far. And so that's where they're seeing some traction, but the volume is small. That's catch as catch can. The radar guys, who started off with automotive stuff, we couldn't figure this out. I wasn't in the mood to invent yet another thing and go do this. What I really wanted was take off-the-shelf sensing technology and build AI around it and do some smart things.
And that's what you did.
Well, we didn't, because the guys with the automotive stuff, we did, but not that way, right? Because the guys with the automotive stuff, the thing that we saw consistently, every one of them do was they failed beyond about 6.5 feet from the source. Like, what the heck's going on here? Why are they all showing the same behavior? And ultimately, we realized that it was all about the FCC and how much power you can pump through a radar in some of these homes. Out on the road, there are no restrictions. You can do whatever you want. But inside a home, power levels, bandwidth that you can use with the radar is very tightly controlled, especially in the spectrum that automotive lives, which is 60 gigahertz, now 77 gigahertz. We're like, okay, now we know. Now we at least have a clue about what's happening. Oh, by the way, by the time we were done solving with that clue, we'd actually created something that didn't just see beyond the 6.5 feet. We'd created something that could see through walls into multiple rooms all across the house without running afoul of the FCC. So this is what the device is, but let me show you what's in it.
What is it called?
It's called Serenity. The company's Cherish, so it's Cherish Serenity. Here's what's in it. So this is very close to the final. I didn't bring the final board that is shipping, but this is very close to that. It's got 4 chips that are actually the same chips that you find on cell towers. Right? And those chips generate the signal that comes out this antenna, and that antenna beams the stuff into your home, and it sees through walls. And it can see through 2 walls, 40 feet away. And what comes back then gets collected here, and then on the back, this is where all the AI runs. So we're not taking anything that's happening in your home off this thing. We're literally running all the AI that we're generating, that we're deploying at the edge on the device, and all that's leaving this is the insights, the data that we're collecting after we've done the processing. So things like your heart rate and your respiration, things like your body position continuously 30 frames a second.
And this is off a cell phone signal?
This is running in the
5G?
same spectrum as 5G.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And it doesn't interfere with your phone?
Not at all, because we're running in part of the spectrum that's permitted for this kind of use.
Okay.
With the power level that's permitted in the home. Right? So what can this do? This thing, when we launch, I showed you a video from last week on stage. We had a stage like this. This is sort of hollow, made quite an impact on people, where we had somebody walk up, device was sitting in a corner, walk past it, wander around, our app was up on screen, you could see the person show up, house is empty, the person shows up, you can see that they're standing, you can see that they're walking, all of a sudden drops to the ground, there's this big bang, everyone there's a gasp in the audience, and then our technology, our AI running here detects that the person has fallen and raised an alarm, and that's the beginning of what we're launching. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. What this can do with the AI that we've got running on this is we can actually track your body position with a skeleton that we extract at 30 frames a second. So we can actually watch your head, torso, and limbs, 13 points on your body, and their motion at 30 frames a second. That unlocks all sorts of really cool stuff, because now we can measure your steps, we can measure your gait, we can measure your time to rise. You're having difficulty getting out of chairs, we can measure that deteriorate over time. Those are important medical indicators for deterioration in your health.
Theoretically, you could share that not only with your PCP, but with your family.
Exactly.
You could monitor elderly relatives and get the feedback and
Exactly.
know that they were struggling. Even when you ask them, they tell you they're fine.
Exactly. Or when they didn't tell you that they fell, but you now know that they
Yeah,
fell, because now you've got
100%.
an app where the alarm will go off, and you can actually push a button. We've designed this to be, a two-way communicator as well. You can push a button and come right into someone's home and talk to them. And this thing, if it detects that something bad is happening, like you've fallen, will actually tell you, hey, Rick, it seems like you need help. I'm calling Tammy. Okay? And then off it goes. If it doesn't say stop, if it doesn't hear you say stop, it's going to go ahead within 5 seconds and make that call to Tammy, your daughter, who lives, a 4-hour flight away. And our app will go off, and she'll be able to talk to you. And so that's where we're starting.
So the very cool technology. We're running low on time.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the Alarm.com and Verizon relationship.
All right, great. Verizon, I can't talk about. I can't talk about AT&T.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
The stuff with Alarm.com is kind of magical for us. They are our initial first at-scale launch partner, and this past week we introduced this technology to their entire dealer network, 10,000 dealers, ranging from small mom-and-pop home security companies, neighborhood companies, to very large companies like ADT that are really white-labeled versions of Alarm.com. This device will hit the market in January. We'll introduce it at CES. We're now free to start talking about it because it's out. 10,000 dealers know it's got to be out. In January, you'll actually be able to start buying it directly from them. They'll come and install it at home, and you'll have this available. AT&T's initial agreement with us, we signed that in April. We're working initially to focus on enterprise sales, focusing on senior living facilities. So large senior living facilities, nursing homes, assisted living centers, where we're putting this in high volume units, 800,000 units at a time.
That's great.
And giving them the ability to actually market something that they have to solve for now, which is during COVID, these places really, the underbelly of the beast was revealed, and they lost a lot of consumer confidence. So this for them is really a marketing thing as much as a safety thing. Hey, your mom and dad are safe here, and grandma and grandpa are safe here, and here's why, and you can track them just the way we can now, without us being creepy in their bedroom.